In the previous video, we talked about the basic building blocks of synthesis, specifically subtractive synthesizers, but the general principles kind of do remain the same for most synths. You have some kind of a sound generator. In this case, we have classic oscillators. You have a core shaper, in this case, a filter. And then you also have modulators, and we talked about the most common ones, your envelopes and your LFO. Envelope being like a one-time thing and the LFO being a cyclical pattern. So here's our LFO influencing the amplitude envelope, creating like a tremolo effect. And then here we're going to have envelope 2 influencing the amplitude envelope, a one-time thing every time I hit the key. Okay. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the other controls, the very common things that you find on most synthesizers and really almost all subtractive synthesizers. Now, briefly, I did want to mention like this X mod here. So this is a cross modulation where oscillator 2 influences oscillator 1. I'm not going to say anything more about that at this point because that's really one of the more esoteric and unique features of this instrument. But once you understand the core building blocks, then you have time on your own to kind of dig into what makes each synthesizer unique. And whether you're using the manual or just using your ears, that's one of the fun parts to all of this and not something that we're going to go over here. It's very easy to hear and to understand. But yeah, I'll leave that up to you to do on your own. Let's talk about now some of the other modulators that are very common to most instruments. We have pitch bend and we have our mod wheel here. Mod wheel is also going to correspond to CC1 on most MIDI controllers, and we will get to this in just a little while. But let's start with the pitch bend. Pitch bend, bipolar, you can go up and down. Let's set it all the way up to 100 so we get the biggest effect here. And I'm going to just hit my pitch bend. And that's probably 2 octaves or so, and that's how much the pitch is moving. That's something you can record in real time, or you can draw in with automation at a later point. So let's just very quickly record this just so we can look and see how that works. Okay, there we go. We have our note with our pitch bend. And we should be able to then very easily go in here and take a look at what's going on with our pitch bend. And that's something that we could then draw in manually or, adjust if we wanted to. The other thing that we have with the pitch bend would be the ability to control the filter cutoff if we want to do that. So let's bring our filter down just a little bit. Make sure we can hear that. We'll make it a little more extreme just for the sake of it. And then we're going to set our depth here. We'll again go all the way up so we can get the biggest effect. You can hear how that works in that bipolar configuration. So it's uncommon that people do this, but it could work for you if you need to move both up and down on the filter cutoff. More likely you'd be using some kind of an LFO to do a move like that. More often you find people using the mod wheel here to control the filter cutoff, or again, we could control pitch. Now, what's unique about this instrument is that this is hardwired to the LFO. So when you're actually turning this up, you're setting the depth of modulation on the LFO on that parameter. So here we have the filter cutoff, and we can actually add a little bit of this LFO to the filter just so we can hear it first. And that's setting the depth like so. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to set this all the way up and then move the mod wheel. And we could also set this to pitch as well. So that's kind of unique, and that's something that, is again something unique to this instrument specifically, but we have more control. So if we wanted more of a classic setup here, what I could do is I could go in here and we'll see that we have CC1 selected, and when I move my mod wheel around, we're getting that little image trace. And so if I want to add a little bit of additional functionality to this instrument, I could do it very easily by just going in here and doing something like that. And now we have that effect working like so. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that, you're never really limited depending on the DAW you work in. Pretty straightforward and easy to work with. So that is pitch bend and also the mod wheel that we have control over. Again, every single instrument is different and unique. Here we have our pulse width modulation, and we're going to see that we have 3 different controls. Two of these controls, these ones down here, are going to set depth, and this one's just going to be manual. So if we go over to our pulse wave, we can hear that we can set that up like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this on to the LFO. That's what that symbol corresponds to. And sometimes that's where it does take a little bit of experimentation. And this is going to set the depth of this pulse width. So my guess is by default, it puts it right into the middle, and then it's just moving it more and less away from that center square wave point. Don't know that for a fact, but that's what it sounds like to me. And then likewise, we could actually have this working with our first envelope. So that's what that little symbol plus the 1 corresponds to. So let's crank it all the way up, and let's just do something like this so we can really hear it. Make it more extreme if we want to. So it's attacking up and then decaying down and coming back to that middle point. We could change that if we don't want to hear a square wave at the end. And there you go. Okay, so that is what we have with our pulse width modulation. Finally, we're going to look at the playback and unison settings. This is a really important area to find on any synthesizer that you're working with, especially if you're modifying presets. So we can see in this instrument, we have a really unique one, which is chord. You're not going to find this in every single synthesizer. Stacks these voices on top of each other and emulates chords. Let's jump back into mono mode here and see what we have access to from mono mode. So if we follow this little diagram, you can see that we can work with the glide and with the legato. So let's bring glide up and let's hit a couple notes. Interesting. So glide is corresponding to a pitch glide that's occurring. And now I'm going to hit legato, and let's do the same thing. So no longer hearing the pitch glide. Now if I play legato, which means one note on top of another note, in mono mode specifically here, we will hear the pitch slide. So I'm going to hit the C key, I'm going to keep holding that down, then I'm going to hit the F key. And I'm going to let go of the F key. Now I'm going to let go of the C key, hit the D key. So it's only going to do that glide when you overlap notes, and that is very useful for playback on certain, phrases or whatever. And again, that's something that you've heard in a lot of music, whether you're aware of it or not. That will work in unison mode and in chord mode, but it will not work in poly mode, because in poly mode, we could be actually playing literal chords. We can hit more than one note at the same time. But in these other modes here, in unison and in chord mode, could do something like that. Now in unison mode, instead of stacking like 3 or 4 voices on each other, we are going to be just stacking a second voice. So when I play my C key, just always getting that same note, that C note with a second voice. But to really take this to another level, what we're going to do is use the detune and the spread. So detune is going to slightly offset the pitch. Again, spread is going to spread that out in the stereo field. Put it in chord mode, same thing. Now, what if you actually wanted to play your own chords, like you had a string patch? That is when you would take advantage of the poly mode. So this is now making it polyphonic. You can play more than one note at the same time, but notice that detune and spread are no longer going to work. So this is a really interesting instrument in the way that it opens up possibilities in some modes and then it takes away in others. And in essence, that is going to do it for this video. I hope this has been helpful to you. This is just one synthesizer. We could bring up any multitude of synths and we could kind of do this exact same breakdown, specifically with subtractive synthesizers. And we might do that in another video. But for now, that's where we're going to leave it. Have fun playing around with subtractive synths. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Have a wonderful day and take care. Bye.